When my mother laughed at the Christmas Eve dinner table and said, "At least this one is useful," I silently put down the platter of turkey. The scent of rosemary lingered on my fingers. The light from the chandelier pierced the silver tray, reflecting only my flushed cheeks with strange clarity. The eyes of the 12 people at the table were not on me. They were fixed on the finished product that had taken 8 hours to prepare. "This is Vanessa," my mother said. "She's in PR at Sterling. She's already in management, and she's only 29. Mother's voice was sweet as honey. "And your other daughter?" someone asked. My mother paused for just a beat. "Where did Caroline go?" "She's very good in the kitchen." I am 33 years old. I manage fundraising for presidential campaigns and organize weddings for celebrities. My company has been running for 15 years. And yet, in this house, I remain nothing more than the kitchen staff. Mother looked at me, her smile never wavering, and said, "See? At least Caroline has something she's useful for." A wine glass clinked softly. I kept the shape of a smile on my face. I set the plate down. Without saying a word, I turned and went back to the kitchen. Stuck to my back was not applause, but silence. Even though my dignity was trampled on in front of my family, I chose to back down silently to keep the peace. Do you think my choice was wrong? When I returned to the kitchen, the heat from the oven still lingered. The smell of turkey fat and herbs clung to the air. The exhaust fan hummed with a low, steady drone. When I stand in a kitchen, the way time moves changes a little. I wasn't in a hurry, but my hands sped up naturally. I didn't have to think about what to do next. My body just moved. The position of the knife, where to place the plates, the flow of movement, through endless repetition. These things had moved outside of my conscious thought. Being able to do things without thinking is comfortable. At the same time, it becomes an escape, a way to avoid thinking about anything else. Perhaps I have stopped thinking in this place for a long time. I untied my apron strings and placed it on the counter. The sound of the fabric settling seemed unnecessarily loud. My hands were shaking slightly, just a tiny tremor, something no one else would notice. I took one deep breath. The air I inhaled was warm. When I exhaled, my throat ached just a little. In moments like this, I always tell myself the same thing. I'm okay. It's no problem. I had never stopped to consider if those words were truly mine, or if they were something I had been taught to say. From the dining room, I could hear the sound of plates clattering and voices laughing. Someone raised a glass. Someone else applauded. With my back turned to them, I imagined the scene. 12 chairs, perfectly folded napkins, the turkey sitting in the center. My mother's voice rang out clearly above the rest. Soft, proud, a little bit animated. At that rate, the topic of conversation would be my sister's job until the end of the night. Management youth, future potential. Topics that are easy for anyone to nod along to. I didn't want to blame anyone for that, but standing outside that circle had become my normal before I even realized it. I am Caroline. Ever since culinary school, I have worked in food-related industries. Now, rather than standing in the kitchen, I mostly handle planning, coordination, and managing the overall flow. Sometimes I decide on the flavors. Other times I make decisions on staffing and progression. But in my family, there is rarely an opportunity to talk about that. Here, I was the daughter who can cook. Nothing more, nothing less. My father, my mother, and one younger sister. My sister decided on her path early on. She has stacked up achievements that are easy for anyone to understand. I have always stood a little behind her. I took on the role of filling in the gaps. From the back of the dining room, I heard someone ask about my job. I couldn't make out the exact question, but my mother's answer was crystal clear. Oh, yes. She is better suited for behind-the-scenes work. I couldn't find a reason to deny it. It is true that I have done behind-the-scenes work for a long time, overseeing the whole picture, avoiding failure, fixing things where no one sees. I was good at that. But when I thought about what implied within those words, whether it was about my aptitude for work or my position as a human being, thinking about the difference made it hard to breathe. I placed my hands on the sink. I didn't move until I could feel the coldness in my fingertips. Useful. That word remained stuck deep in my ears. My mother has always been someone who avoids direct rejection. She never says, "You are no good." She says, "You are good at this." It sounds like she is offering a choice, but I realized much later that she was actually setting limits. My role was always clear. The person who prepares, the person who organizes, the person who doesn't fail. My family is used to me moving without saying a word. I have almost no memory of being asked to do anything. And yet, the expectation is placed there beforehand. Without a word being spoken, my role became fixed. I moved to fill that shape before I could even question it. I thought that not questioning things made everything smooth. I believed that not making waves was a sign of maturity. There was no room in that house to stop and think about whether that was right. I thought it was a good thing that preparations were complete before anyone asked. Behaving that way made the gathering proceed smoothly. I made that choice myself. I wasn't ordered by anyone. That's why I felt that I was being selfish for feeling this discomfort now. I was the one who had accepted the role. I remembered the night I told them I wanted to go to culinary school. I was 18. My father didn't even fold his newspaper. My mother smiled and said, "That's very you." I was relieved by that expression. I thought that not being opposed was a sign of acceptance. I understand now. That wasn't agreement. The dining room door opened slightly. Someone peeked their face in. "Caroline? What about dessert?" Before I answered, I looked at the clock on the wall. The hands were pointing to a time a little earlier than planned. There were still 10 minutes left. No one was actually inconvenienced yet. "I'm bringing it now." My voice sounded calmer than I expected. I opened the fridge and took out the plates I had prepared, one by one. There were no chips in the crust of the tart. The layers of the trifle were perfect. If this were work, it would be a passing grade, no problem. But in this house, what is evaluated is not taste or perfection. It was simply whether or not I was needed. As I lined up the plates, I suddenly remembered a certain phrase. Someone said it a long time ago. I can't remember who. Maybe I read it in a book. Being useful is not the same as being respected. I didn't understand the meaning at the time. It just stuck in my ear. That was all. I didn't know why I remembered that quote now. It just lingered, snagging on a corner of my mind. I told myself I didn't need to find the answer right away. Even if you don't understand the meaning, some words stay in your memory. Sometimes they come back later, in a different form. For now, I decided to just accept it as it was. I couldn't yet connect it to the events of tonight. I returned to the dining room with the dessert. The conversation broke for a split second, then immediately resumed. Mother looked at me and nodded with satisfaction. "Thank you. That helps." That was it. I didn't take a seat. I naturally stepped back toward the wall. No one looked puzzled. It seemed that from the beginning, no seat had been planned for me. A small weight sank into the depths of my chest. It wasn't that someone stopped me from sitting. I did it myself. The moment I realized there were no empty chairs, my body naturally moved toward the wall. Even if I had sat down, I wouldn't have known what to say. The topic was already set. There was no room for me to join. The more I thought about whether that judgment was right, the vaguer the answer became. But this, too, was my choice. I was the one who chose not to disrupt the atmosphere. That night, when I put on my coat and stood in the hallway, Mother kept her back to me. Father was reading the newspaper. My sister was texting someone. I said nothing and opened the door. The outside air was cold. It went straight into my lungs. I got into my car and started the engine. I didn't turn on the radio. Right now, I didn't want to hear anyone else's voice. My hands gripping the steering wheel were no longer shaking. That fact scared me a little. It wasn't that my emotions had settled. It was more like I had shoved them down. I have used this method many times before. It wasn't just today. That fact spread quietly through my chest. As the car began to move, I asked myself a question. Did I do something wrong tonight? Or was the fact that I did nothing the mistake? I couldn't find the answer yet. When I woke up the next morning, last night felt like a continuation of a dream. I could clearly recall the smell of the kitchen and my mother's voice, but the reality of it felt thin. I stared at the ceiling for a few seconds in bed before sitting up. I made coffee and sat in the chair by the window. Outside, it was still quiet. There were few cars on the street. I wrapped both hands around the mug, feeling the warmth seep in. The tension I had felt so strongly last night didn't surface now. I picked up my phone. A row of unread notifications lined the screen. Most of them were work-related. As I checked them, I unconsciously straightened my back. Here, I am the one who judges. I am the one who decides. I read through a confirmation email about a large project next week. The text was concise. It didn't ask for unnecessary explanations. The client was proceeding on the premise that I had a grasp of the whole picture. I should have been used to that feeling. And yet, suddenly, Last night's words floated up. Useful. I didn't feel like defining what that word meant right now. I just knew clearly that it was different from the feeling of being needed in a professional setting. When I arrived at the office, a colleague spoke to me. "The client really appreciated your proposal the other day." I thanked him and placed my documents on the desk. Being evaluated isn't rare, but hearing it directly as someone's words made something deep in my chest move just a little. Because the reason for the evaluation was clear. Evaluation at work is separated from emotion. Reasons for success and points for improvement are laid out. It becomes clear what needs to be done next. Whether there is affection involved or not isn't important. Trust is treated as an accumulation of results. I was used to that system. I was so used to it that I stopped noticing the strangeness of it. That's why the ambiguity I feel with my family lingers so much. In the morning meeting, I naturally took on the role of facilitator. In moments where judgment was required, I never raised my voice. What was needed wasn't persuasion, but organization. Laying out information, checking for gaps, arranging the order, pointing out what someone overlooked, putting into words what someone was anxious about. Just doing that calmed the atmosphere. I have experienced that shift many times. At work, reasons are always required for decisions. Why this order? Why this choice? I can explain it. I am always prepared to explain. I have never been proud of that fact. I just accepted it as necessary. A place where reasons are not asked for, and a place where reasons are the premise for moving forward. The difference between the two was becoming impossible to ignore. I had never given a name to this role. I didn't need praise or applause. I just need everything to proceed without stagnation. That was my job. Adjusting the overall flow, summarizing opinions, showing the next step. There was no hesitation in that work. No one calls me behind the scenes here. I am there as a necessary person. After leaving the meeting room, I looked back at my notes. The minutes reflected the decisions I had voiced, exactly as they were. No one made corrections. There were no objections. I don't think that's special. It's a scene I have repeated many times. But suddenly, I realized I was overlaying myself with the dinner table from last night. The same human being, the same judgment skills, but depending on the place, the way I am treated is so different. In the meeting room, I am not someone's substitute. I wasn't called to fill a missing piece. I am counted in from the beginning as a necessary person. There was no special excitement in that feeling. I just accepted it as a matter of course. But every time I remembered last night's dinner, I realized that this matter of course does not exist in that other place. The moment I thought that, a doubt arose that I was just overthinking it. Time spent not deciding seems like it stands still, but it actually piles up. You cannot keep standing in the same position without choosing anything. I knew that. I knew it. But I pretended not to see it. I used to think that if I didn't choose, I wouldn't lose anything. But recently, what I am losing by not choosing has become clearly visible. I have felt lost before, but it wasn't because there were too many choices. As a result of continuing to choose not to choose, I no longer knew what to choose. Now, the type of hesitation has changed. I am starting to stop avoiding the act of choosing itself. I am not yet used to that change. During lunch break, I opened my schedule book while eating a simple meal at my desk. Between work appointments, family plans were written in. Birthdays, gatherings, end-of-year plans. I could erase them, or I could leave them. I looked over the family plans written in my schedule, one by one. I could have drawn a line through them. And yet, my fingers wouldn't move. I felt that if I erased them, something would end. Ending something isn't necessarily bad. Still, I hesitated a little to make the decision to end it myself. I wasn't clear on why I was keeping them. Was it obligation? Habit? Or was I still hoping for something? I haven't decided yet whether to continue or not. I told myself it was just that. In the afternoon, a short message arrived from my mother. "Thanks for last night. Big help." That was it. No impressions. No concern. I stared at the screen and didn't reply immediately. It wasn't that I couldn't think of a response. I just thought about whether there was a need to reply. Until now, I replied before thinking. I believe that connected to smoothness. I didn't reply, and time just passed. The notification disappeared from the screen, buried under other messages. Seeing that, I felt the tension in my shoulders relax just a little. I'm not ignoring her. I felt like I was confirming for the first time that nothing bad happens, even if I don't respond immediately. In the evening, I got into the elevator after finishing a meeting. I saw my reflection in the mirror and stopped. My expression was calm. I wasn't particularly tired, but I felt like the smell of last night's kitchen still lingered somewhere. When I got home, the room was quiet. An empty space demands no role from me. I took off my coat, aligned my shoes, and dimmed the lights. I felt a strange sense of relief in that sequence of movements. I realized the air in the room was kept uniform. No one's expectations. No roles were placed here. I switched the lighting, leaving only the necessary brightness. In this space, I can be anyone, or I can be no one. I felt peace in that freedom, but also a slight bewilderment. I sat down on the sofa and stayed still for a while. The same question as yesterday returned, slightly changed in form. What am I continuing in that house? Is it a relationship, or is it just habit? I didn't intend to find an answer, but I couldn't deny that I had started thinking about it. I don't know the reason. I just felt something quietly beginning to move deep in my chest. I felt that now that I had become conscious of it, I couldn't go back to how things were. That night, my phone vibrated shortly. It was a message from my work partner. I want to talk a bit about that project. Do you have time? I looked at the screen and took one deep breath. Then, I typed a short reply. Just a little. Now is fine. After sending it, I turned the phone face down. The thing moving deep in my chest still didn't have a name, but the action I chose was clear. For the next few days, I lived my life as usual. I woke up, went to work, made decisions, adjusted things, and went home. Plans proceeded without delay, and no problems occurred. From the outside, nothing had changed, but in the small details, a feeling different from before remained. During meetings, there is a time of silence when someone waits for my opinion. I chose my words as usual and presented a conclusion. Everyone nodded, and the next step was decided. There was a lightness in that flow that I hadn't felt before. This is good. There was certainly a judgment in my work that made me feel that way. I can explain the reason and the basis. And yet, in the corner of my mind, another question floats up. Wasn't I acting the same way in that house? I filled in the necessary parts, behaved so as not to stop the flow, and chose so that no one would be troubled. For a long time, I thought that was just my personality. But at work, that behavior is evaluated. At home, it disappears as a role taken for granted. I had tried not to think deeply about that difference until now. During lunch break, waiting for the elevator with a colleague, the topic of the upcoming holiday came up. Are you going to your parents' place for the end of the year? For a moment, I searched for words. I could have said, probably. I could have said, I haven't decided yet. In the end, I answered, I don't know yet. That wasn't a lie. My colleague didn't pry any further and moved on to another topic. No one asked for a reason. That was a little surprising. Even if I didn't explain the reason, even if I reserved my choice, no problems occurred. On the way home, I stopped at the supermarket. Looking at the ingredients on the shelves, I realized I was unconsciously calculating for a group of people. I stopped that habit immediately. Today, just enough for myself is fine. There is no special meaning in that decision. As I told myself that, something moved quietly deep in my chest. I returned home and put down my bags. The room was quiet, with no one's expectations. I stood in the kitchen and drank a glass of water. At that moment, that phrase floated up again. Being useful is not the same as being respected. I felt like I understood the meaning a little more than before. Not completely, but I couldn't just pass it by like before. I opened my calendar and checked the next family event. The date was approaching. I could participate. I could choose not to go. I could make up any number of reasons. I knew that no matter which I chose, the world wouldn't change drastically. And yet, my fingers stopped and wouldn't move. Until now, I chose not disturbing the atmosphere as my top priority, because that was the way to avoid thinking deeply about whether it was right. But now, I felt that not choosing was becoming a choice in itself. At night, a short message arrived from my work partner. I want to decide the direction for the next item. What do you think? I looked at the screen and wrote a reply immediately. The content was concise, and the judgment was clear. After sending it, I put down the phone. Something close to a quiet conviction remained in my chest. I haven't broken anything. I am just slowly re-choosing where to use my energy. I don't know yet if that is right, but I could no longer treat everything with the same weight as before. That notification didn't arrive as a special request. The message from my mother was short, closer to a confirmation than an errand. "We're gathering a bit next Sunday. Can you come?" It was the same wording as always. There was no intention to blame in the text, at least on the surface. But I could sense the premise contained within that one sentence. Not whether I would come, but the feeling that my coming was already built into the plan. I understood that fact more clearly than before. I couldn't reply immediately. Looking at my schedule, I was free. I could adjust work if needed. I wasn't feeling unwell. I couldn't find a reason not to go. But the reason to go wasn't as clear as before either. Having no reason is a freedom, but also an escape. Unless I decide not to go, the relationship seems to continue. Unless I decide to go, I don't have to suppress myself. I think I have placed myself in that ambiguity for a long time. I turned my phone over and left it for a while. It wasn't a dramatic need for time to think, just that the habit of answering immediately felt a little heavy now. At work, judgment was still required of me. Multiple projects were proceeding simultaneously, requiring adjustments. I checked documents, set priorities, and sent necessary communications. There was no hesitation in any of it. What needs to be decided for the whole thing to move well? That sense is ingrained in my body. Between meetings, my partner stopped by my desk. "This direction looks good. Can I leave it to you?" I nodded. "I'll adjust the details, but the general framework works." My partner didn't ask anything else and went back to his seat immediately. It's not grand enough to use the word trust, but a relationship where judgment is shared has naturally been established. Watching that scene, I suddenly thought, if I showed this interaction in front of my family, how would they take it? It would probably require an explanation. That this is work, that this is my role. And by the time I finished explaining, the topic would have moved on to someone else. After returning home, the message from my mother remained unread. The number on the notification disappeared. Sleeping quietly within the screen, I made a simple meal in the kitchen and set just one portion on the table. Before, I might have prepared extra, on the premise that someone might come. I noticed that habit was fading little by little. The next day, a message came from my sister too. It was about the same matter as Mom. "You're coming Sunday, right?" The text was light. It felt more like a premise than a confirmation. I looked at the screen, started to type a short reply, and stopped. "I'm coming. I'm not coming." I hadn't decided either yet. That night, I thought back to family gatherings for the first time in a while. Laughter. The dining table. Food. Everyone naturally assumes their role without malice. In that midst, only I had somehow been fixed on the preparing side. I never voiced dissatisfaction about it, because it wasn't a distinct enough emotion to call dissatisfaction. But looking back, I was always standing. Before taking a seat, I was carrying someone's plate, pouring drinks, looking for what was missing. I didn't believe that action was my value, but I felt that if I wasn't useful, the reason for being there would fade. Thinking about it now, maybe that was a premise I created myself. As Sunday approached, I checked my schedule again and again. The blank space remained unfilled. I didn't have the courage to decide not to go. I didn't have a reason to decide to go. I was standing still in the middle. The night before, a message came from my work partner. "Can I have a little time Monday morning? I want to do a final check on the direction." I replied immediately, "No problem." First thing in the morning. There was no hesitation. After sending it, I lined up my actions. I am responding to work. I haven't replied to my family yet. I didn't intend to compare which was right, but the difference was visible more clearly than before. I don't think that I want to cut ties with my family right now. I haven't started hating them, but I didn't know if I could continue in the same form. Sunday morning. I turned off the alarm and stared at the ceiling for a while. Outside was quiet. There was no need to rush. I picked up my phone and opened the messages from my mother and sister. They remained there, unread. I typed a short sentence. "I can't go this time." The sentence was short. Still, I stared at the screen many times before sending it. If I added words, it would become an excuse. If I explained, it would mean I was trying to make them understand. I didn't want to make them understand. I just wanted to choose. I didn't write a reason. I didn't add an apology or an explanation. After pressing the send button, my chest tightened just a little, but my breathing didn't stop. The reply didn't come immediately. After saying I wouldn't go, there was no sound of anything collapsing. Instead, a void was created, a void I didn't know if I should fill. Until now, I was the one to fill that void. If there was silence, I added words. If there was discomfort, I moved. This time, I did nothing. That fact remained quietly. The time without a reply was surprisingly quiet. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't get restless. That silence felt incredibly real. Nothing was broken. Just that the gap I used to fill remained there. I didn't try to force myself to fill that gap. For the first time, I was leaving a blank space as a blank space. I put on my coat and went outside. I had no plans. I just wanted to walk. Listening to the sounds of the city, I thought, is this rejection or is it distance? I can't give an answer yet. The only thing I know is that I haven't broken anything. I am just trying to weigh my own worth for the first time. Sunday night, the room was quieter than usual. I dimmed the lights and sat on the sofa, feeling the presence of the world outside the window. I wasn't doing anything special, just letting time flow. My phone was still on the table. I hadn't turned it face down. I hadn't hidden it or moved it away. The reply from my mother hadn't come yet. Nothing from my sister either. After confirming that, I put the phone down. Before, I wouldn't have been able to settle down. I would have thought about the reason for the silence, supplemented it with words, and looked for a text to maintain the relationship. Now, my emotions didn't move that far. It wasn't cold enough to call indifference. I hadn't sorted my feelings enough to say I had abandoned expectation. I just stopped moving reflexively. I stood in the kitchen and boiled water. I poured it into a cup and waited for the scent to rise. There is no role in this action. I am not being asked by anyone, nor am I being evaluated. That was a little strange. Until now, I was used to placing myself in places where I was needed, at work, and with my family. If there is a difference, at work, that necessity is confirmed through words and actions. With family, it becomes a premise without confirmation. I don't want to compare which is right. I just see the structure of it now. The steam faded, and I took the cup back to the sofa. The heat transferred to my fingers. It was a sensation that was definitely here. What have I been doing in that house? Cooking, preparing, organizing the space, moving so no one would be troubled. I don't regret it. I don't think that time was meaningless. I just started to wonder if that was the reason it had to be me. There is no immediate answer to that question. My phone vibrated shortly. I looked at the screen. It was a message from my mother. I see. Understood. That was it. There were no words to stop me. No words asking for a reason. Not even a polite, "That's a shame." I stared at that short string of text for several seconds. She literally just understood. Like when she gets a report that the microwave is broken, or when she learns a package is delayed due to bad weather. There wasn't even disappointment there. It was just a confirmation of stopped function. That fact soaked into my brain like cold water. Ah, I see. I wasn't loved, nor was I hated. I was simply convenient. If I am no longer convenient, there is no need to get angry or clingy. She just looks for an alternative means or gives up. That cruel lightness was the true nature of my last 15 years. I thought my chest would tear apart, but strangely enough, the pain passed in an instant. What came instead was an overwhelming lightness, as if the bottom had fallen out. I placed my phone on the table and turned it face down. I don't have to expect anything anymore. I don't have to prove anything anymore. I don't have to whittle down my soul to be convenient. That short reply wasn't a rejection. It was a permission slip for freedom. The room is silent. Right now, in that house, someone might be in a bad mood. Someone might be rushing to order pizza. Someone might be grumbling. It's because Caroline isn't here. That noise doesn't reach here anymore. I looked around the room. The furniture I chose. The lighting I decided on. The silence I allowed. Before, I called this silence loneliness and feared it. I thought it was proof that I wasn't needed by anyone. But now, it's different. This isn't loneliness. It is peace. A place where I don't have to worry about anyone's mood. Where I don't wash anyone's dishes. A place where I can just breathe as myself. In the center of my own castle. I took a deep breath. My lungs filled with new air. The shaking in my fingertips was completely gone. For the first time, I smiled without caring about anyone's eyes. I didn't even need to look in the mirror. I only needed to know myself that I was smiling. Just that was enough to make the world feel full. The next day, work began as usual. I exchanged a brief confirmation with my partner, went into a meeting, and made decisions. No one knows what happened on Sunday. They don't need to know. At work, I hadn't lost anything. Rather, I realized that the speed of my judgment had increased a little. It wasn't that my hesitation decreased. It felt more like my priorities had become clear. During lunch break, I walked outside alone. Nowhere special, just a normal street. As I walked, I remembered those words. Being useful is not the same as being respected. Before, I didn't understand the meaning. I can't say I understand it completely even now. But the outline, that I don't need to keep shrinking myself just to be useful, is slowly becoming visible. I don't intend to explain that to anyone. I don't need anyone to be convinced. I might just choose relationships that can continue without explanation from now on. I don't know yet if that choice is right. Without knowing, I finish my work today and return to my room. I turn on the lights, align my shoes, and place myself in the quiet space. Here, I don't have to be useful. I don't have to offer anything. There is relief in that, and at the same time, a slight anxiety. Still, the current me is choosing to return to this place. The words moving forward are simple, but moving forward without deciding where you are heading sits right next to anxiety. I haven't set a direction yet. I am just choosing not to stand still. The decision not to go back is a little different from the resolve to move forward. I'm not taking a huge step. I'm just deciding not to keep standing in the same place. Just that makes the scenery start to change. I can't see far yet, but my footing is certain. I don't know if that choice is correct. For now, I am allowing myself to proceed without knowing. Was that choice right, or was it wrong? I don't intend to decide yet. The only thing I can say is, I will likely never return to a place where I stand without thinking ever again. I didn't destroy the relationship with my family, nor did I completely prioritize myself. I simply chose not to behave the same way as before. Still, do you think this choice was wrong? If you were in the same position, what would you do?